Hi everyone. So I think I've got this set up correctly, so hopefully you all can hear me. Um, it says I'm live, but like in the window it's just shows that circle going over and over like it's not connected, but it seems like I'm connected on OBS. Anyways, I'm just gonna go ahead. It is recording anyway, so I'll have a copy of it just in case. So if you are in here watching, I have the chat window open. So if people come in and start talking, hopefully it does show up, but if not, I apologize for that. So I'm just going to do the continuation. For anyone that's watching this, I started this drawing on for my Patreon. It's in two sections. The first section is doing the construction and starting with simple shapes to build up the head, constructing it out, and then designing the shadow shapes. And then I think the first video ends with me filling in the dark shapes, the shadow shapes, in one value. In the second part of the video, I start to build up the shadow values more. So you can see it's got, there's more value happening here, and I make some corrections that I missed in the original video and kind of discuss how to start to build up the values and make corrections as you go along. So in this stream, I'm going to work on building up the values more and then working in the halftones. I'll probably start working on the halftones right away for this video. And then I'll just probably do that. There's probably still room for correction. So like technically speaking, like that first video is all about doing the lay-in or the block-in, and the second video was, at this stage of the drawing, it's still kind of like a block-in still. Block-in or lay-in, depending on the word that you use, are both similar terminology, or similar idea, different terminology, but similar idea. And so I'll start to continue to build this up, make any corrections that I see that pop out. If I didn't mention, this is a drawing after Dean Cornwell. So if you want to see the drawing I'm looking at, just do a quick Google search on Dean Cornwell and you'll find the painting. Dean Cornwell was like one of the golden age of illustrator, from the golden age of illustration. So his work is amazing. I love it. So I guess I'll just start drawing here or building up some of the halftones. So for this, I'm going to probably start down in the cheek here. Sorry, if I seem a little slow, I'm just trying to organize my laptop so I can see my reference, the chat, and part of the stream. Too many windows. Okay. Oh, there we go. That's much better. Okay. Now I can see. So I'm probably going to start right down here on the cheek because I want to start to build out from the shadows here. And right now I'm using a light pencil. I've got a 3H. So I want to start out pretty light as I build up those halftones. Wow, it looks like it's, hopefully that's coming up on the camera. Let me turn that light down just a bit. So right now as I'm starting to kind of build in the value and the shape that I see. So I'm looking at that very intense red that's on her cheeks. Obviously, I'm not making it red. I'm just trying to copy the value, but that's what I'm looking at right now. And then start to build it up down around the mouth as well. So in the Patreon video, I think each video is about an hour and a half. So this is about 3 hours into the drawing here. And in the drawing, I go over, or in the videos, I kind of go over like the mistakes that I made and correct it along the way. So it's pretty educational, and I discuss each step in real time as I demo. So like every time I demo, I don't rarely do I pre-record something in voiceover. I will for some of the videos, but like most of the time, everything is done live. That's kind of like how you would teach anyway, so kind of just kept the same idea. What you could do, I haven't done it for this, but I could have drawn in that red shape and then just filled it in. I'm kind of just slowly building up the value and building up the shape as I see it. And now I'm just going to kind of build up this value into the lip. The lower lip is very dark overall, so that's going to come up. I'm going to build up that value a lot more later. But currently I'm just doing a light glaze over it. And I'll probably be readjusting some of these shapes too. As you might notice, like the proportions aren't 100% identical to his drawing. That would be a very challenging thing to do in just a couple hours. So as you can tell, since I'm working over the lips, I made her lips, not on purpose, it's just how it came out. They're just a little bit larger than how they are in the actual painting. No reason other than that's, like I said, that's just kind of how it turned out. If I wanted this to be like identical to his painting, which I don't, I'm just using it as a reference more or less, it would just take a lot longer of a time to do it. So I'm kind of going in some of the shadows here, cleaning them up as well. As I start to kind of build up some of these half tones, they will most likely get a little bit too dark. Some of the dark areas will probably start to look a little bit too light because I'm starting to build up, competing values in the half tones. Well, they're not competing yet. They're still obviously well separated, but some things will start to change as I build up the value. And coming in here with that very hard pencil just helps clean up some of the shadows as well too. So again, I'm just going to kind of put a nice glaze over this. So so right now all the shadow down here just kind of needs to be a little bit more unified. There we go, that's starting to look a little bit better. Obviously I'm going to come in here, do a little bit more work later on, but I'm gonna kind of neglect it for right now. And I'm gonna build this up as well. And I'm going to jump back into the rendering. So the other reason too why I started on this side of the face to build up the halftones, like I mentioned earlier, you want to kind of start out from the shadow, but it's also the way the light is coming down. We have darker halftones on this side, more so than we do on this side. Obviously it gets a little bit dark in the cheeks here, but overall I feel like just due to where the light is hitting, you're going to have your darker values on the left side of the face. So that's why I wanted to start there. Or just one other reason why. Now I'm going to start to come down in the chin. Now that value on the chin here, it's not quite as dark as it is in some of the halftones happening around here. But this is again just the early build-up stage. What I almost could have done too, there's always again many ways of going about a drawing. Since there are no really any whites, specular highlights happening on the face, I could have just put one light tone over the whole head. That would have been a nice way of like knocking back the intense whiteness of the paper. Again, a lot of times too, like how I'll work is also dependent on the goal of the piece I'm working on. For example, if I was doing a long portrait drawing, I would probably be spending a lot more time in some of the earlier stages, making sure everything is like as perfect as I can get it, so to speak. Again, depending on if it's like a portrait that's meant to look identical to somebody, or has, I mean, let's just say identical, but has a good likeness. If it's just a head drawing, then that's a little bit different too. The other thing that might change it is like here, to me, this is more of like a demo kind of sketch. Like some of the graphite drawings I've done, I'll spend in 10, 20, 30 hours on a portrait. This is going to be, much quicker than that. It won't be done by the time I'm streaming, that's for sure. But its purposes are more just for a demo than it is trying to finish a piece. Do my best just to kind of illustrate the concepts and have it be educational. And if you're wondering, I'm still using that 3H. I have not switched to anything else. It looks like the value is starting to come through on the camera. Right now it looks, when I look at the monitor, this looks like a stain. That kind of annoys me, but it looks fine in the drawing. It's just the way the light is kind of hitting it right now. Graphite can be kind of hard to photograph and film because it gets shiny. Now I'm just going to kind of rotate the pad here. So if you're wondering, I'm drawing flat on the table, which is not my favorite way of drawing at all. It's just, it's easier to, um, it's easier for recording purposes and keeping the proportions as close as I can. Where if I'm filming it like from the side, like normally I like to draw at an angle like this, but it's a lot harder. The proportions get distorted in the video. But yeah, normally I like to draw at an angle or kind of like straight up and down. There are some advantages to drawing flat, like rotating the pad around. But for the most part, I like to have somewhat of an angle on it. Because right now, while it keeps the proportions better in check for the video, it makes my proportion seeing a lot harder because it's when it's flat, and that's why I don't recommend always drawing flat, especially if you're trying to get proportions correct, is the page is now distorted, like things are going away from me, so it makes it a lot harder to keep your proportions in line due to the skewed perspective. So I might just pick up to another pencil here just to start to blast in some darker values momentarily. Mainly just probably because it doesn't look like I'm doing a whole lot with a 3H, at least on the camera. To me, it looks like stuff is happening, but I'm not sure how well that is translating. And for the most part, too, I'm using a very light touch. I'm not pushing very hard. You can see my hand, too, is holding the pencil near the rear of the pencil. I'll switch positions. It just all depends on what I'm working on at the point, at the moment. So right now I want things to be light and loose while I put down these tones, and not like if I want to be more uptight and exact, I'll choke up on the pencil more. But right now, since I'm trying to be, light and subtle, I'm working from the back end of the pencil. Right now I'm going to come in with a light glaze going across here. I want to knock back that white of the paper. And same with this shape here. I kind of want to tone down this light shape. That's still the white of the paper, so kind of knock that down. It still needs to, it's going to have to be pretty light or feel bright in the end, because that's a pretty strong highlight happening on the top of the mouth cylinder there. Okay, so now I think I'm going to jump into, I got an H. So now that I kind of like blasted some light in here, this value on the cheek needs to go up. And And this is one of the reasons why you want to have your um, values planned out early on in the drawing and have a clear distinction between your light and dark values. And you set that up in the two value drawing or the block-in stage of the drawing, because if you jump too early into your halftones, you will probably get into a battle between the values in the dark and the values in the light. Meaning that I know this is something I used to do a lot, and I've seen my students do it a lot as well too. Where, again, if you start, a lot of people want to jump into the rendering phase like right away because that's the fun part of the drawing, so to speak. But if you do that, you're going to probably, like I said, have a battle between your lights and darks, and in the end, your whole drawing is going to turn out way too dark, and it's probably going to look pretty muddy or messy because of that. So I want to try to do my best to be disciplined throughout the process and stay and be aware of that. Try to not go too keep my values under control and make sure nothing out here in the lights will get as dark as anything in the shadows. And that should never happen for a few things. Like maybe if there's a mole on her, obviously that would be a dark value in the light. But for the most part, generally speaking, you're never going to have those two values. Anything that's in the shadow should never be at that value, same value as something in the lights. There could be certain lighting situations, but then again, that wouldn't be. But like, say, for example, I had like a rim light out here. Then I might have a bright light, but then again, it would just be a separate light source. But I kind of want to just do my best to try to explain that, so I don't have someone saying, or if somebody was wondering about that type of situation. And if you're wondering, I've mostly been doing like, I haven't been using a whole lot of calligraphy, so to speak, on the drawing. I've mostly just been using like little swirlies to kind of fill in the value. So even here, like these, as I'm building this up, that's getting too light. So I just need to come in and with a little glaze of value, start to knock that back. So back to kind of like the idea of keeping your values together. So like most likely, like I won't use any like B's or higher B's out in these halftone areas. Nothing is quite that dark. I might at one point use a little bit, but for the most part, like you're not going to throw a 6B. a 6B out in the lights, generally speaking. So I'm just kind of just looking at the shape that I've started to build up for the cheeks, that darker red shape. And I kind of need to, it's coming along well, but I need to kind of, I think, define the shape a little bit better. It's one of the things I really like about Cornwell's work is he's got like very like chunky shapes and brushstrokes, what looks like very thick paint. And so like usually when you work that way, you gotta have very thought out, uh, interesting shapes. They're still simplified down, but there's a pretty cool shape happening, or interesting shape happening for that cheek. So for me, he's a really good artist to look at when you're trying to figure out shapes and how to simplify them and still make them effective. So I'm just going to jump back to my 3H here, kind of just get a little bit of tone over that first wing of the nostril on the left. And start to darken up the shape on the side of the nose. And then I'm going to kind of come in with the eraser here to kind of make a little bit of adjustment to the initial drawing I had, kind of carve that out more. And then start to kind of like rebuild the shape. So you get that kind of like that wrinkle coming down from her due to the expression that's going across the top of her nose here into the forehead. But I also want to be careful, so that shape, I had to thin it down. I had it looking maybe a little bit too thick. That's a good thing to use an eraser for. And I tell like my students a lot, you want to get comfortable using an eraser. Don't think of it as you've made a mistake. It's just another tool to help get your drawing to where it needs to go. And use it as, it's just a tool. Don't think of it as, oh man, I made a mistake. I don't want to erase that, because then I have to admit that I made a mistake. Art is all about making mistakes, or learning how to draw is all about making mistakes. Obviously, of course, learning from those mistakes and seeing where your drawing needs to head. As you get more comfortable and more competent with the tools, and you've done a lot of practice, your guesses that you use to make your drawing become more and more educated. But you're always making mistakes and changing shapes and and all that. So don't worry about it being a mistake. It's just all part of the process. I know that can be kind of a hard thing to get over and to kind of understand. But if you want to really get good at art, you want to get really comfortable with screwing up. It's like a big life lesson, more or less, that sticks with you. You're always going to be making mistakes in life, so you might as well get used to it and keep learning and improving from that stuff. So I picked up an HB. I didn't realize what I had in my hand. And the HB is what I did most of the initial drawing and the two value stage in. So for those of you that haven't watched the video yet, or if you're not on my Patreon, that's how the drawing started. It started entirely with an HB pencil. So I think it's coming along nicely so far, I think. I haven't gotten away from it yet, so who knows? But like I dealt with most of the drawing issues in the other two videos. Not to say that it's, like I said, it's not perfect or identical to the original, but like I said, again, it's not going to be, at least for this, short, overall, what would be considered a short amount of time. So right now, as I'm trying to build up some of the values in the eye here, I want to be careful because I want to keep this nice reflected or bounce light that's happening. I want to keep that shape. I don't want to lose that value. So as I'm starting to kind of build up around it, I'm being careful and cognizant of what I'm trying to do in that area. So like again, like the values underneath here are going to be a little bit darker. And then again, the eyebrow darker in value as well to help kind of keep that reflected light. And this kind of goes back to, again, keeping your values organized. Well, like a common mistake that people will do is they'll see that lighter value in there, but they'll get away from it and make it too light where it'll start to compete with the values out here, not really being aware. It's like, hey, that's still in the shadows. It needs to be in that range still. So if I'm looking at the drawing right now, this value in the reference, not my drawing, but in the painting, this value here is darker than anything out in the lights, and it needs to remain that way. At least for a believable, realistic painting. Obviously, if you're doing something maybe bizarre and stylized, well, that's different. But when it comes to being, an observational or realistic type of artist, that's what's going on up there. So I'm doing my best to capture that. So being very subtle, again, back with a 3H, starting to build up that value. He uses a very, I'm curious to know if this is just reproduction, but there's a very strong red he uses where the white of the eye would be, which is very interesting. It looks cool. It works because it took me actually a while to notice it earlier, not today. I've been looking at it for a while, but like it's very interesting that he chose to do that. Maybe it helps sell the idea that it's maybe bloodshot, it's a stressful situation that she's in, or just I mean, like I said, because the value is there, it works. And you would still get a little bit of red overall in the eye, generally like in the corner. But like I said, it's kind of interesting. He was that bold with it, and it still works. Now, not every artist is going to do that, and they don't have to. It's just an interesting choice he decided to make. So I'm going to jump back to my HB. Start to darken up the cast shadow that's happening here. You can see how that cast shadow just goes right down into the core shadow happening on the cheek. And so that I've, again, built up these values more, here I probably need to kind of just do another pass at the halftones here, because they've started to get a little bit too light. And you can see how I'm angling my pencil, again, to kind of go with the form. And I've been doing that kind of like the whole time here. So I see those values kind of coming this way to help describe that plane, where I have kind of like these marks starting to come that way to help describe that plane of the cheek. And then I want to get a little bit of tone over this whole area. Oh, I might be going a little bit dark. That's okay. I can come in and fix that up. And it's not like that value actually turned out dark. It just got a little smudgy right there. Yeah, so just coming in and darkening up those lips a bit more. I'll probably I'll come in with the HB now. Or an H, sorry. And kind of get that value up a bit more, and then kind of carve around the highlights that are happening on her lip. Now I'm not sure if those are, I doubt they're white. So that's why I'm having a little bit of value around them or on them, and then hopefully as I come in here I can carve around them as I build up the value. So like very often will you see, well, I mean, everyone has different opinion on this, but you rarely will kind of see like a true like bright white on the face, unless it's like that specular highlight in the eye. You know, rarely are the whites of the eyes white, for example. There's always some value to them. Now that doesn't mean like this is one of the things that can happen because it's a common mistake I'll see students make. They'll make the white of the eyes white because they just, oh, that's a white part of the eye, it's gotta be white. In reality, it's not like that at all. Um, but it's not like you can't do it and get away with it. You'll see artists stylistically make the eyes, the whites of the eyes white, and it'll work. But realistically, it doesn't work that way. But normally, like when you're learning, try to not make the um, whites of the eyes white. There's always gonna be a bit of value to just about everything, and that's why like I don't think that highlight is white. It probably has a little bit of maybe a little bit of yellow or something in it. It's hard to tell, of course, without seeing the actual painting in person, because who knows how much the camera is distorted or how much the photo could have been edited. That's why you always want to do your best to go visit museums and galleries because you want to see paintings in person. Yeah, so again, if you guys are watching, like, I want to mess around with the settings here because, like, I still can't tell. Like, the chat looks like it's empty, but um, I don't think it's working in line with the, the software I'm using. So if you're watching and you're asking questions, I'm sorry, I can't see them. And now I'm going to kind of sort of bring out some of the value with the HB, start to bring it out here. I need to kind of correct or adjust, I should say, correct or adjust. Like this part of the lip, corner of the lip that's happening, or underneath the lip that's starting to wrap around, like the shape I have just, it isn't super like attractive looking. I need to make it look a little bit more interesting and kind of like, I think I got such a dark line. Probably I drew that dark line when I was designing out the shape. I want to kind of erase that out. But I need this part to be a little bit more subtle. So again, using the HB, kind of darkening up the corner of the lip. And that's why, again, like you want to, I came in here earlier and kind of got like a flat tone of the value because there's that highlight that is happening due to the mouth shape. So you have the lip here, or where the lip is red, and then you got the extra fold in that skin, which is technically going to be a highlight, but it's not like a bright highlight. It's just a highlight and a value from the forms that are underneath it. So just take my kneaded eraser, kind of tap out that little bit of that dark shape that I kind of had going up. Just looked a little awkward, and I'm going to try to fill in around it. And now I'll sort of jump back into the chin. Again, look at all the kind of the subtle shapes that are happening within the chin. You got this kind of darker value on top. You have a little bit of a highlight right here, and then darker value underneath, and then again a little bit lighter where the under part of the lip here connects to the chin. And now I need to kind of start to build up some of these values around the mouth cylinder here. And then build up those darker halftones happening on the jaw. And knock back that little bit of light happening right there. So I probably should go back to a 3H. Kind of built that in with an H, so it was a little bit darker than I should have gone. That means I'll probably have to darken up the value on this side just a touch. And now I kind of want to tone down again that shape. It's gotten now too light still. As I've built up the values darker around it, it still feels a little bit intense. I would kind of readjust it as well too. So just take the eraser here, start to carve out that shape more. So it just looks a bit more interesting. And then I'll tone it down with a pencil. So it's really like using a combination of the eraser and the pencil to try to get the shape that you want. Sometimes it's great if you can entirely draw around it and draw that shape initially or build up to it, but sometimes it doesn't work out and you're just gonna have to get that eraser out and recarve it. So I think I forgot, yeah. So I'm kind of just take this little guy here. I forgot to bring a tissue. But right now I'm just gonna kind of soften up some of this information. To kind of build up that softer edge. So there's already a little bit of graphite powder on this. This drawing came out a little bit larger than planned when I worked on the video. So I ended up using this guy to kind of block in that two value part of the drawing, just to help speed it up. So even here I got this, just tap it a little bit with the eraser to kind of knock it back. Ultimately I'll probably rebuild back up a little bit. So here I'm just being kind of like very gentle with tapping the kneaded eraser to knock back the value subtly. And now I'm just gonna go bigger here. I'm gonna go with a 4B. And I want to just kind of come in and start to darken up that core shadow again. Kind of after blending it out a bit with a, I don't know what the heck that thing is called, but it's something I've started to use a little bit more recently. It's not like one of my main tools, but I've seen a lot of other people use it. Pretty cool, so I like it. It's just a good way of pushing around the tone, but I could have used a blendy stump or, like I said, a tissue. Whatever kind of works for you is fine. That's why I recommend just like experimenting with different stuff and see what happens. And just something to think about too, is just because you see an artist use a certain tool and you want to try it out, of course, go try it out, but it's also okay if you don't end up liking the tool either. As you kind of experiment with a bunch of stuff, there's things you'll like, there's things you won't. Now I'm going to start to kind of just darken up a little bit underneath the chin. I want to kind of pop that chin out a bit more by building up the values. But I want to be careful not to go too dark. And I probably won't. It's just the 4B. I'm still not pushing very hard. I'm not being super light either, so I'm somewhere like in the middle with my pressure sensitivity. But I was mentioning this in one of the, I think in the second video, while it looks pretty dark underneath the chin here, and it is technically speaking, it's in the shadows, it's not black. It's not the same level of the blacks that are happening in the hair up here are darks, and same with the eye. The eye is a little bit darker. Um, so it's kind of cool because you get some atmosphere in there, and you want to kind of, again, look for those values. Um, so you don't make something too dark in an area where it doesn't need to be. Again, stylistically, you can get away with it. There's artists who would definitely push very dark to black shadows, and it works. So, like I said, there's certain things that work in reality, but then you can always break the rules too if you're successful at doing it. Well, that's again, that's kind of like a different approach, though. You're at that point, you're kind of trying to design out how you want your image to look, or if there's something you want stylistically to say in your work, where you might push those values even darker. You know, it's kind of like a similar idea to the whites of the eyes. You know, the eyes aren't really white, but you can get away with it stylistically. Again, if you're a good designer and you've planned out your piece well. So as I've built up a lot of these values around this side of the face, notice here this area kind of needs to come up in value quite a bit. Maybe so much not the core shadow around the nose, but the inside parts of the shadow. And I started to darken up the hair here. So I'll probably just go for a few more minutes. On this demo here. Maybe I'll come back to it in another stream. I definitely need to practice my streaming more since it is irritating me that I can't see the chat. And it worked the first time, but I've had issues with it ever since. So I need to go back and do some research here. Because what's the point of streaming if you can't communicate to your audience? Or communicate with them during it. Obviously, I'm still communicating with you guys, but not the other way around. I've been having a hard time kind of figuring out, and I talked about this probably in the first video, but I'm assuming this shape here, so I never liked the shape that's happening in here. It's probably supposed to be her ear, but it looks a little awkward, so I couldn't tell if it was ear or the hair. It's just kind of hard to tell what he was trying to say. It's not like a deal breaker to the painting. The overall painting's, awesome. So it's not like a knock to the painting. I just have a hard time kind of like seeing what it is. And sometimes it would make more sense. Like I said, when you go and see art in person, things change in reproduction quite a bit. Um, Especially when it comes to like an oil painting. Like seeing an oil painting in person is just, it can be like otherworldly compared to seeing it just like in a magazine or online or just a photo somewhere else. Because you can even see where some of the glare from the, oh, I'm assuming it's a glare. There's a pretty bright white thing happening right here in the hair. And I'm assuming in the painting it's not really there. That's just the light. I'm assuming that's probably like a thick brush stroke and it's just kind of picking up a highlight. That is my guess, because that's just such an odd spot to have something so bright. But that is my assumption to what is happening right there. And obviously I'm ignoring it because I don't think it's really part of the painting. So as I kind of rework and build up the value a little bit in the core shadow here, kind of like reworking the shape of it as well too. Like it's okay if you don't have your shapes fully designed right away. I kind of will work in a mix of ways where if I have a lot of free time on my hand, or I should say a lot of free time, but if I have a lot of time to spend on the drawing, excuse me, that I'm working on, and I know I'm going to be spending a lot of time on it, I'll take a lot of time in the beginning stages and design the shapes out to the best that I can first. But a lot of times too, as you move throughout your drawing, those shapes will become more and more clear. You don't always see them right away. So for me, I'll kind of like work in a mix where I have a rough or a decent shape design, but I know I'm going to have to make adjustments. I'm going to see things differently later. And that's if I'm working in that type of an approach. Sometimes I'll, work more very soft and slowly build up the information and making adjustments. So it all kind of just depends on how I feel or the goal of the piece. But that's good. Like, I can still make corrections and adjustments to the drawing. I haven't gone so far that it's not possible to make corrections or changes as I see fit or as I see things more clearly. But it's just cool to look at this painting and keep studying it over and over as I'm working on the drawing here, and really seeing the subtle value shifts that are happening within the values. And in the painting, that is both changing. Obviously, because I'm just working on graphite, so I'm just focused on the value. But it's not just the value that's shifting in the painting. It's both the value and the mix of like a little bit of red that he hits along here that kind of lightens it up and adds a little bit more atmosphere to the painting. And then it starts to darken up a little bit more as it goes down to the chin. So it's seeing those subtle little changes and shifts that are happening that make it so much more believable and interesting to look at. I mean, that's one of those things that will help push your drawings and paintings further. Is trying to look for those subtle shifts and fluctuations and changes that happen, whether it's in the value or the shapes. It's everything. It can be very, especially when you do like a very long rendering, you can start to see that stuff more clearly. Like I've done so many long 40-hour plus drawings in my life where it's cool to hunt down and look for those subtle fluctuations that's happening. Again, whether it's the shape subtly changing, the value within that shape, and the edge work around it. And just gonna come in and do another glaze on this. Same reason, because as I've built up the values more overall, I see this needs to just darken up quite a bit. But like when you're working in graphite anyways, it tends to be a bit slower of a process. Or if I was doing this drawing in charcoal and on newsprint, I probably would have had it entirely done in the first two videos or close to it. But pencil can be a bit slower. Not to say you can't be fast with pencil, obviously you can be fast with it as well too, but charcoal tends to lend itself better to that. And normally too, I explain this a lot in my videos, but like for those that are watching that don't that aren't part of my Patreon, and they're just trying to learn. Normally, I would be taking quite a bit of breaks and getting away from my drawing as well too, because your eye needs to get refreshed. So I've been staring at this, nonstop for the last hour plus. So normally, like what I'm trying to explain to you guys is, when I say frequent breaks, I don't mean like every 5 minutes, put a mark down, take a break, but like usually like every 30 minutes to an hour, I'll start to get away from it, or at a certain point in the drawing where I need to. I like to try to get away from it momentarily just to get a fresh eye on it and see what's wrong and get a fresh perspective. Be careful there because I'm using that 4B in a light space. Like I said, you want to be careful about doing that. That's why I kind of stopped doing it. It's okay. Like again, if you have very good hand control and dexterity, you can get away with some of that. But I was trying to I was trying to darken up what looked like a little bit of a light spot here that was bugging me. It's more subtle in the drawing, but when I look at the monitor, it picks it up. So I don't know if it's a camera thing. It's like this light spot that's happening it shows up more on the computer screen for whatever reason on my laptop than it does in reality, but it's kind of bothering me, so I want to knock it back a little bit. So you can see that little bit of halftone peeking through into that shape. So I kind of wanted to get that. It helps add, again, that variety and interest to the shape. That makes it look more interesting and believable to look at instead of having just kind of one flat shape going all the way down. I need to kind of darken up this area a little bit more. So even at this stage of the drawing, I don't have, and by the time I end the drawing here for this session, I won't have anything that's what I would consider finished yet in the drawing. I mean, the values are starting to get built up. It's getting there, but I don't know if I would consider any area finished at this point in time. And even here, this shadow needs to kind of come up in value a bit more. I was mentioning this in one of the videos prior, but like I really like how he just has this very chromatic, warm shadow coming down. It's not gray or anything. That's a red, more or less, reddish orange color coming down for that shadow, and it looks super cool. It helps, again, breathe air or life into the painting. Now, again, would that be like that in reality? There's a good chance of that. It's probably some reflected light happening off her skin that could be getting in there, making it red like that. But it also may not have happened, and he added that because it looks more believable. Adds more interest and believability to the painting instead of having like this cold, dead shadow. Especially since it's a little bit more out in the lights, where over here, these shadows are much cooler overall, and then he has that nice warm one right on the forehead. So kind of just readjusting the shape in the hair, or I should say like the darker halftone shape that's happening in her hair. I'm not readjusting the overall hair shape, just that halftone shape. And need to be, what's nice about hair is it has a lot of flexibility, even if I don't quite, like it's not gonna make or break my drawing if I don't have it, again, like identical. Like obviously if like the proportions or placement were off hugely in the features here, it's gonna stand out. In the hair, not so much, because hair is constantly changing shape. And there's different, hairstyles, etc. So like you're not. It's okay to have that stuff not. It has a lot more leeway for interpretation and how you design the shapes and place them. But I was trying to be careful, I guess, so to speak, in this area because like overall, I think this maybe came out a little bit large. It's okay in my drawing, but like in comparison to what's going on here, it's like this shape has gotten a little bit too big. But maybe I just need to make a quick adjustment and it might work out fine. But being that it's hair, like I said, it's not a big deal. You're not going to notice it in the sense of it being a problem. Now, maybe if you were looking at my drawing and trying to compare it exactly to his, yeah, there's obviously quite a little bit of a difference there. But like I said, no big deal. So here, I kind of came in and just drew in the shape, um, like scuffed along the shape. So here I'm trying to think of how that shape looks and how it sits on the hair. Like if I came in and kind of did this shape like this and filled it in, it would look a little bit awkward. Um, so here I'm trying to fill that shape to go, or the lines to kind of go with the flow, direction, and form of the hair. So basically what I'm trying to say is as you make your marks, try to be aware of the form the best that you can and lay those marks down, like with respect to the form, and it's going to feel a lot more believable. You can quickly flatten out your rendering by basically not being aware of that. um, I always think back to this one drawing I was working on. I think I've discussed this before, and either in classes or in another video. But I was designing out this monster for fun, and I was rendering him out in pencil. And this is, a long time ago before I had a good understanding of form and how to properly render understanding form. So as I'm starting to build up, I think this monster kind of looked like an abomination from Warcraft. So it kind of had that same feel. So he's a bigger guy. He had a big gut. As I'm trying to render out the gut, I was putting marks everywhere to kind of build up the form. And I was like, oh, that looks awful. And it's because my lines were going in so many different directions instead of building up the form well with good line work. It just flattened the whole image. So it didn't look that good in the end. I always kind of use that as an example on why you want to start to try to understand form and the marks that you make, and laying down your marks with respect to the forms that you're trying to create. Okay, I'm going to go maybe like about 6 more minutes, and that'll be the end of the stream. So I'm just trying to think on a lot still obviously needs to be built up to get a finish out of this, but overall I think it's coming along pretty well. Like I said, if I had a lot of time to spend on it, I would probably readjust some of the shapes more. But if you're, again, working on, excuse me, I just need some water. But when you're working on your own studies, like say you're doing a master's study or whatnot, again, not every one of those studies needs to be an extremely long effort to learn something from. You can always do sketches. If you've been following me on my Instagram, like I used to do a lot of master study sketches that are done in like 30 minutes. and those are still helpful. You're learning a lot. You're trying to see the overall shapes. So again, try the more you can kind of plan it out and think what you want it to be for, the better. Like, is this going to be a long study? Is it going to be a short study? And see what you can get out of it more. When you first probably start doing master studies, though, you're more or less, or you're just going to copy them, and that's fine. I know there's been plenty of times when I would do a lot of master studies, a long time ago too. But I wasn't learning as much from them. I was just did my best to copy them, and they came out good still, but I wasn't quite learning as much because I was just in copy mode. It's like, okay, how is this going to translate over into my stuff? Excuse me. And whatnot. How am I going to put this into my own work, or how am I going to use this for like life studies? So it kind of takes a bit to figure that out as well too. But just start doing them, and do long ones, do short ones. Don't overthink them. But you want to start adding them to your study repertoire if you're not, because they can definitely help you. You're going to learn a lot from them. You'll learn how the illusion of drawing and painting works. And you'll learn that more by doing studies as opposed to just doing life drawings and whatnot too. So if you're like the type of artist who just goes into life drawing sessions and you don't have a teacher, but you're trying to get better, master studies will help out with that. Go back to the 3H here. Just gonna build up a little bit of value on the cheek here. I just don't want it to look like I gave her like a 5 o'clock shadow. So I'm going to be very careful and subtle with that value buildup. So just kind of trying to build up that little bit darker of a halftone shape in the chin. I think I'm going to leave it alone for right now because I'm running out of time. I got like 50 seconds left. And overall it looks pretty good right now, but there is, like I said, that bit of a highlight that's coming in there. Subtle highlight, remember? Like there's a value here, highlight, and value there. But for right now, I'm just going to leave it as it is. All right, so this is going to be the end of this stream. And I want to thank you all for watching. I hope it was informative and somewhat entertaining. But if you're interested in, again, like what I do and improving your drawing, just check out my Patreon. It's Patreon / Matt Draws Stuff. And again, thank you all for watching.